Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to another edition of the Sunway Education Inclusive Leadership Series. This is, I believe, the 7th edition of the series. I thank you all for coming. It's been such a pleasure to see so many of you post-Hari Raya. I'm glad that the Hari Raya is not lengthened your desire to come and attend this session this afternoon. Ladies and gentlemen, we are indeed very honored to have our distinguished guests this afternoon. And allow me to take up some time to introduce our distinguished guests this afternoon. Ladies and gentlemen, Professor Dame Ijeoma Uchegbu is the president of Wolfson College, University of Cambridge. Having assumed the role not so long ago in 2020. A distinguished pharmaceutical scientist, she is internationally renowned for her groundbreaking work in neuroparticle drug delivery and unwavering commitment to diversity and inclusion in science and education. And hence, you can see how eager we were to have her join us this afternoon. And I must say, it must have been quite tiring with Simon and Professor David from Hong Kong not too long ago. It all seems so well, but here they are, and we're really very happy that we could manage that time to join us this afternoon. She's the fellow of the Academy of Medical Sciences and honorary fellow of the Royal Society of Chemistry, and serves as the governor of the Vulcan Trust, one of the world's largest private medical science research funders. She's also the Chief Scientific Officer of Nanomerics, a pharmaceutical nanotechnology company she co-founded to develop innovative solutions for her pioneering research has led to major advances in delivering peptides and other therapeutics across biological barriers, including to the brain, resulting in the development of Envelta, a non-opioid pain medicine candidate addressing the opioid crisis. For her scientific contributions, he has received numerous accolades, including the Royal Society of Chemistry Emerging Technologies Prize and the UK government's Women Outstanding Achievement in Science. Professor Uchegbu has also been a transformative leader in higher education. As the UCL Provost and for Race Equality, she initiated programs that helped UCL achieve the Bronze Race Equality Charter. She has presented to the UK House of Commons on racial disparities in education and is a leading voice on equity and representation in recognition of her services to pharmaceutical science and she became commander of the Order of the British Empire in the 2025 years. So, ladies and gentlemen, please join me in welcoming our guests, Professor Dato Elizabeth Lee, who is CEO of Sunway Education. And we're going to explore innovating breakthroughs through inclusion and kindness. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Paul. And ladies and gentlemen, thank you so much for coming. As I was peeping out with Dame Ijeoma, I said, look, it's a full house. They keep dragging out the chairs to accommodate more and more people. And I was about to say, the next time we have Dame Ijeoma back, we must make sure that we have JC1 or JC2 or JC3. I think JC1. Yes, for the Jeffrey Chia Distinguished Speaker Series next. But first, since Dame Ijeoma is only here for less than a day, literally, we are totally delighted to have her here with us. And as you heard just now, what an illustrious short biography of Dame Ijeoma, all the way from Nigeria to become the pharmaceutical scientist and now president of Wolfson College, Cambridge University. What an inspiring journey. Dame Ijeoma. Will you kindly share with us your early experiences, perhaps both personal and even educational, how these have shaped your worldview and your drive to innovate in science and leadership.
Thank you so much, Elizabeth, and thank you so much, all of you, for coming. I was hoping there'll be at least a dozen people here, so I'm really, really pleased that there's a lot more than a dozen. Thank you so much, and I'll definitely be coming back again. So, I'll start from the very beginning. So, my parents came from Nigeria, and they came to study. So they came to the UK to study from Nigeria. My mother was quite young, my father a little bit older, and then I was born as soon as they arrived, and hence my name, Ijeoma, means have a safe journey. And so they were hoping they would have a really safe journey in their trip, and also that they would have a good time when they were in the UK. So hope is one thing, reality is another. They divorced quite early, and so even though they were hopeful, it didn't quite work out. And then I was in foster care, so I lived with a white family for my very early years. It was quite normal for West African parents to put their children up for foster care. So their hands were free to study. And so eventually I was reunited with my father, and then did my primary school and then my secondary school in the UK. And when I was in primary school, I had a really influential teacher. So you're in the business of education, and this teacher, 50 years ago, really, really believed in me. Really said that you could do special things. And at the time, of course, you don't believe it. But with hindsight, you can see that someone taking an interest in you and really believing that you can do things makes a huge difference. So my teacher, Miss Gable, she really said that you can do whatever you want, John, so long as you behave. Because I wasn't a very good student. I was constantly seeking attention, and so eventually I did knuckle down. And then I went back to Nigeria with my family, and my father had delayed going back to Nigeria because there was a civil war. So when I got back to Nigeria, we went back to the part of Nigeria that had really suffered in the civil war. So we went back to an infrastructure plant. I was 13. And so 13, just becoming interested in boys. Boys were not interested in me, but I was very interested in boys. And then sort of going to Nigeria where no running water, no electricity in my boarding school. And that really sort of develops you, because it makes you understand that you can thrive in an adverse environment. And I think being able to thrive in an adverse environment is a key superpower. You don't have to excel, you just have to thrive. So I went through that, I did my degree, and then I decided I wanted to do a PhD. And the whole getting into science was simply because when I went to Nigeria, the curriculum was very different. The curriculum in the UK, when it came to history, was kings and queens of Europe, but the curriculum in Nigeria was about the Songhai Empire, Musa, and things that were very, very different. But the language of biology, physics, chemistry, and mathematics was the same. And so getting into science was really easy for me. I literally fell into it because it was the lowest barrier for me. I didn't have to do much. And then eventually, after I finished my degree, I decided I wanted to have a scientific career. It was quite difficult in Nigeria, so I came back to the UK. But when I came back, I had 3 children. My marriage had fallen apart. So then I was doing my PhD as a single mom with 3 children. And again, it's being able to thrive in an adverse situation really helped. So that's me in a nutshell. You need me? Yes.
What a whirlwind. So you got married at some point in there, and you had 3 children. Were these all in Nigeria, or these were in the UK?
So I was married in Nigeria.
Right.
My marriage was really brief. I didn't really give it much time when it wasn't working.
Sorry.
I was good at some things, but I was really poor at being a Nigerian wife. It wasn't a skill that I had, so I left. But I brought my children along. I didn't put my children up for foster care. I actually looked after them. And at a certain point, we lived in a bed and breakfast for the homeless. I was very ashamed about that.
In the UK?
In the UK, yeah. And I didn't tell my supervisor that I was a mom, my PhD supervisor, because I thought he wouldn't take me seriously, that he would think I'm not really a serious scholar. I'm part-time mom, part-time scholar. But the thing is that once I told him that I had children, he couldn't do enough for me. So I always say to young women, if you're in a difficult situation, just ask for help. If you actually ask for help, it's not a sign of weakness, it's actually a sign of strength. It shows that you understand your limitations and you're happy to confront them and ask for help. So that's what I did. I asked for help once I realized that I couldn't keep it a secret any longer, and it was very helpful.
That's so amazing. 3 children, you brought them up in the UK while you were a PhD student. I mean, where are these 3 kids now?
They're all very gobby women.
Oh wow!
They're all very gobby women, and I've got grandchildren.
Whoa.
So and they're all working. They have their own careers. I went on and had a 4th child when I married again.
Wow.
So yeah, and I think now I'm a better wife because I've been married for over 25 years.
I think so. No wonder the first one was brief. I mean, in comparison.
Practice makes perfect.
No, I think it's a matter of, you knew your mistake early and you did something about it. You did not allow it to be a mistake. And this whole idea of you don't need to excel, but only to thrive. That's interesting. I'd like to build on that a little bit more. But because you said you don't need to excel, but yet you have been excelling. How do you explain all this?
Well, from my perspective, I'm surviving. I don't really sit down, wake up in the morning and think, oh yes, Ijeoma, you're really excelling. I've got things to do for the day, which I get on with. People normally ask me, how was it? You have 3 children, and by the way, no maintenance payments. I have to put that out there. So we were living off our own money. We never got any money from my ex-husband at all. But then people say, well, how did you manage? But it's one day after the next. You really are not thinking about, oh my God, my situation is so terrible. You're just putting one foot in front of the other.
I'm a woman of great faith, for example, that has enabled you to do this.
I mean, the good answer would have been yes, but
okay.
So I'm a lapsed Christian. If things are getting really tough, then I remember. If things are going well,
isn't that safe for all of us? Yeah. Okay. Then all right. So you've done your PhD, and then you went. What happened after that?
So after I did my PhD, I did a couple of postdoc years where you're working with a supervisor trying to get skills. And that was actually quite important because my PhD was about nanotechnology. And it was a nanotechnology where we made these nanoparticles using very small molecules. And what we were doing was really trying to reduce side effects of medicines. That was the goal. And by putting medicines within nanoparticles, you can control where they go. So you shift them away from healthy tissue to diseased areas of the body using nanotechnology. And then I went to work for someone who was now working on polymers. These are longer molecules. And I then combined in my mind the nanotechnology from my PhD and the polymers. And then I used polymers to make the nanotechnology. And so the way I always describe this is if you imagine having little bits of wool. So you've got little bits of thread or yarn, and you scrunch those together to make a ball. Now if you have that yarn and you just blow, the ball will fall apart. But if you have longer threads of yarn and they're all tangled together and you make a ball, it's hard to then get them to disentangle with just a puff of air.
Right.
And so that was the difference between the nanotechnology of my PhD and the nanotechnology I've now taken into the clinic. It was the fact that I was using longer molecules, so I made nanoparticles that were more stable, less likely to fall apart until they got to their destination. And this was the key innovation. But it was going to 2 different labs and learning from my lab where I did my PhD and another lab where I did my postdoc and thinking, where's the gap? And recognizing that gap and then creating something different.
Wow, so how far are you away from that, what prize is that called? I forgot. Nobel Prize.
As far away as you are.
No way. I mean, surely this is all very pioneering stuff, isn't it? I mean, for me, definitely.
I mean, it's interesting work and I enjoy it, but it's not Nobel Prize worthy. I wish I could say it was, but I would lie.
If it's not Nobel Prize worthy, then it should make a lot of money, right? I mean, surely it's got to pay off somewhere.
This is our hope, but nothing is certain.
Yes, because I have met you in here, with Matt, yeah, another Canterburyan, and he heads up our innovation labs, you see, and the ventures arm. So, this is something that we could be interested in. Yes, Matt?
Well, excellent. We're in the clinic, by the way.
You see, to me, this is all very important because just before coming here, I was stopped by a phone call from Sunway Medical asking me about my visit yesterday and saying something like they had prescribed me the wrong medicine. So therefore, I'm a little bit confused now as to whether I should go back and then throw some of this jargon that you've told me to impress them a bit, and maybe they will be more careful in the future.
They should be more careful anyway.
Yeah. So anyway, this is really fascinating. So you've spoken briefly about school in Nigeria, and you've put your children through school in the UK. What difference did you notice in your own experience versus their experience, and what was the best of the two worlds?
Yeah, so when I got to school in Nigeria, so I'd left the UK, and I would say I had quite a good group of friends. I was, well liked, but when I got to Nigeria, it was very new. Everything was very different. So I spent a lot of time trying to make friends, trying to fit in, and I found that quite difficult at the time. I mean, I tried really, really hard, but it was quite hard. I think with my children, when we came over, of course they've come from Nigeria, but they were very young. The youngest one was 1.5, the next one was 4, and the oldest one was 8. So what I noticed with the 1.5-year-old, who she's now in her 30s, she was saying a few words in Nigeria. But when we got to the UK, she stopped speaking. And, I was quite worried about her. And I think it's the shock of the new environment to the few words she had. And she, at two and a bit, actually took her to a speech therapist that really worried about her speech. But I was told by the speech therapist that, once she goes to nursery, she'll be fine. She's the youngest. And of course, when she went to nursery, she started with sentences, not even just words. So there was a bit of a shock, I would say. And then the children, living in real poverty in the beginning, obviously it will shape them and shape the way they behave, and shape what they consider to be very important. I can say that for sure. But they're all very successful. I mean, my second daughter earns 4 times what I'm paid at Wolfson.
Academic life, that's what we give up.
4 times!
Buy us a coffee, please. Wow.
So they're all doing very well at what they do, and they all got great degrees, and so I'm very proud of them, as you can see.
That's excellent. That's excellent. I'd like to move on a little bit to the second part where in a recent article we read that you have said that my approach is always to be kind. So this stands out in a world where leadership is always seen as tough and even transactional. So how has kindness been a strength for you as a leader, especially when navigating, such high stakes environments like scientific research and even academic governance?
Yeah.
I mean, not easy.
No, and I'll track back a little bit to give you some context. So when I eventually told my supervisor that I had children, he couldn't do enough, and he was, the head of the organization, but his kindness was real. I mean, I remember going to him and saying, actually, I need now to have a job in order to pay my bills, because my student stipend's not enough. It's very difficult. And he said, you can't be a full-time mom, a full-time PhD student, and have a third job. It's not possible. Right. So he sort of said to me, how much do you need? I told him, then he said, okay, I'll give you this little job you can do at home so that you don't have to look for it. So that I think was an act of real kindness, really very, very thoughtful and kind of him.
Yes.
And then another example is that when I had my fourth daughter, so I had got my first grant from the Wellcome Trust, and there was the possibility of getting follow-on funding, but I had to apply for it. But I ran out of time because I was heavily pregnant. I was about to go into hospital to give birth, so I said, you know what? Once I've had my baby, she'll be sleeping all day, sleeping all night, so I'll have lots of time to write this grant for this follow-on funding. That'll be so easy. And then, of course, the reality is very different. 4 days after I had my baby, I'm not sleeping, she's not sleeping, and so I'm not sleeping. I've got brain fog, I'm not sure what day it is. And so I phoned the Wellcome Trust and I said, I'm supposed to put in this grant in 2 weeks. But I've just had a baby 4 days ago, and so I'm wondering if you can give me a little bit of an extension on the deadline. Maybe I can submit my grant in a month. And the person on the other end of the phone, a guy called Gavin Mallock, said, congratulations on having a baby. Takes 6 months.
I thought he said, congratulations, you've got your grant.
Takes 6 months. And so I took the 6 months, I wrote the grant, and I got the grant. So it does end with me getting the grant. But that's the act of kindness. So if you think about those things in your past, and then you are now a leader, you're either leading a research group or leading an organization, or you're in a leadership position, you then do understand that just being a human being and thinking about humanity and being kind to people, it makes a big difference. It makes a big difference to their lives. And actually, if you have a team and they know that you have compassion and you have a sense of humanity, I think you get more out of the team than if you just bulldoze people, work people to death, and just think that you have some kind of God complex. I haven't got time for that, because there is a bit of self-interest. Actually, if my research group or my company, people working for me, some of them have worked for me for over 8 years.
Right.
If they are happy, they will put in their best work. And I remember when we were doing our clinical trial, we had done such a lot of work, we went to the regulator, and the regulator said, we're going to give you a fast-track passport because it's innovative, and there is a clear medical need. But we want you to do all these things, and it was 2 A4s full of all the things we had to do. And the team was sort of quite demoralized. Oh my God, we thought we got the regulator to say yes, but we've got to do all these things. So you lift them up, they went away, did all the things that we were asked. I remember I was sitting in my office when one member of my team burst in, she didn't even knock, burst into the office, I could have been on a call, and she said, the MHRA just said yes. Wow. She was so happy in herself because of all the work that she had put in. And so being supportive to the team, you really get the best work out of them. And I think that's quite important.
Yeah, I would say so too. However, in the real world, there are also many wolves in sheep's clothing. They pretend to be poor, they pretend to need your help, but actually they're just trying to, to use a not so nice word, just scam off you. Now, how do you recognize who is what?
Yeah, so the way to look at it is this. If there are 100 people, the scammers will be in the minority. So if you get scammed twice, but you're good to 98 people, I think it cancels it all out.
Wow. That's very encouraging. Thank you very much. I'll still try my best not to be scammed. But then, I like the way you are opening up my mind, because when you're too careful, indeed, you do miss out a lot of the genuine cases along the way, and you might have missed out on helping someone who really needs to be helped.
I mean, I believe that it's a fact. The majority of people are actually kind, do want to do well, do want to do good. But the thing is that the few that are negative, they hog the limelight. And they hog the limelight simply because they're rare. That's why they're always in the newspaper. That's why they're always in front of us, because they're not as common as all the good people. So if you now think about, let's just stray into an area, you think about world leaders. There is one world leader hogging the limelight, but there are many other world leaders that are quietly getting on with things and making sure that everybody is having a good life within their own area of responsibility and influence.
That's true.
But nobody wants to write a story about them because they're the norm.
They're the norm. Gosh, so many takeaways here. So Dame Ijeoma, your work on nanomedicine and drug delivery systems, which you heard earlier on, has actually received global recognition. In such technical and competitive field, how do you balance scientific rigor with inclusive team dynamics and ensure that innovation is both accessible and being meaningful?
So I'll just sort of track back to when I started working on race equality. I don't know if many of you know, in the UK is about 80% white and about 20% either Asian or black, African or black Caribbean. About 4% of the population is black, and about 60% from either South Asia normally. So there are ethnic minorities, and of course the global majority is South, but within the UK, ethnic minorities. And there are disparities in various walks of life. So when I was first asked by the provost to get involved in this work, I was very annoyed, because I thought, I'm a scientist, I'm doing my science, I've got a big research group, and I foolishly thought, this has got nothing to do with me. But I went to the first meeting, and I thought, I'm just going to sit at the back, I'm just going to play with my laptop. Those were not the days where we could play with our phones, but I thought I'd play with my laptop, and they won't ask me to come back again. But then I saw the numbers, and as soon as I saw the numbers, I became evangelical. I thought to myself, I have to do something about these numbers. I have to do something about the fact that if you're an ethnic minority, you may not get the right grade you deserve. If you're an ethnic minority, you may not get the promotion you deserve. And so I got really involved in the work. And I got involved not from a social justice perspective, but from the perspective that if you have a diverse array of people making a decision, you tend to get better decisions, better outcomes. So it's not about fairness, it is about getting the best outcomes possible and making sure we're adding value to all of our students. So I took on this role. I said to the provost, okay, I know in the beginning, I came because I couldn't say no to the provost, but now I want a central role. And I got the role, and then I started working towards what I was doing. I was still running my research group, still doing my teaching, but I took this extra role on. And we did a lot of things, and I won't give you all the details, but we did a lot of things, and we saw tangible differences. We saw more people from ethnic minority backgrounds promoted. We saw more students from ethnic minority backgrounds getting the good degrees. So we really saw over about a 5-year period a change. One thing I'm very proud of is that we had eugenicists. I don't know if anybody knows a little bit about eugenicists, but we had eugenicists celebrated on our campus, buildings named after them.
What is New Genesis? I'm sorry.
Eugenics.
Oh, eugenics, sorry.
Yeah, so eugenicists.
Right, okay.
So we had buildings named after late 19th century, early 20th century eugenicists.
Right.
And I said to the provost, I think we should remove the names. And he just said, we can't do that. We can't do that because these people have made important discoveries. And that's why we're celebrating them. And I said, actually, we should think about removing the names. So he said, well, you can have a committee, but you can't remove the names. But eventually I said, well, why can't we? He said, because they have made important discoveries. And I said, well, you don't know anything about them. You're a doctor. I'm a pharmaceutical scientist. None of us know anything about their discoveries. So let's have someone look at that. So we started a commission. It was headed by a lawyer, Iola Shalanke from Leeds. We took evidence for 15 whole months, Elizabeth. 15 months of hearing evidence on the one hand and on the other hand. And the committee started split down the middle, with one group saying we don't want the names removed and the other group saying we want the names removed. As we went through those 15 months, we all coalesced around we now want the names removed. We want the money that was given by the benefactor to be spent on something else. And so at the end of it, we all came to the right conclusion that we should get rid of the names. And that's something I'm very proud of.
I can imagine, yes.
In June 2020, the names were removed, and instead of those names, we had numbers on those buildings and lecture theatres. And for me, what that means is that 2 of my daughters studied at UCL. Theoretically, they might have walked into that room and sat their exams. And you know that when you're sitting exams, it's a serious evaluative threat. I used to fall ill when I was doing my exams. I would have walked into that room, sat their exams, looked at the name on the top of the board and thought, let me go and find out what this guy has done. They wouldn't have felt good about themselves when they read about this person's pseudoscience. Remember, it was pseudoscience. The names are removed. I have 4 grandchildren. None of them will walk into that room and sit their exams.
Wow.
And for that, I'm incredibly proud.
I was about to ask you earlier which university was this, but you just mentioned
UCL.
It's UCL.
Yeah.
Amazing.
The public record is there.
Cool. I think she deserves a clap. So now, coming to Cambridge, where it's quite well known for being elitist. I have here the president of the Oxford and Cambridge Society, and a lot of Oxbridge members here as well. There's Jarlath hiding behind Shirpin, our president of the UK Alumni Network. And so, yeah, coming to Cambridge, and now with you, stepping into Cambridge, do you see any areas of change you could make to make it more equitable, more inclusive?
So dynamite. Dynamite question. So Cambridge is changing. So a few years ago, so I don't know if you, in the UK, 93% of our children are educated in state schools and 7% are educated in private schools. And the difference in educational outcomes are pretty clear. If they're educated in private schools, they tend to get better grades, better A-levels. And so a few years ago, only 25% of Cambridge students came from state schools when you consider the British contingent. But now we're in the 70s. We're not yet at 93, so Cambridge is also changing. We're now in the 70s. And so one area that Wolfson is particularly focused on is in widening participation for people from lower socioeconomic groups. So we participate in the foundation year program, and we have, I think that in the foundation year program, I'm not sure how many students overall, but 70% of those students go on to get Cambridge courses. And the foundation year students don't have the A levels that the other students have, but they take a test, they're interviewed. No, they don't take a test, they're interviewed. They provide some biographical details. They get admitted to the program. And 70% of them then go on to get Cambridge degrees. And they're not for people who have had normal trajectories. These are people who have had multiple areas of deprivation. So at the moment, we have students who have been homeless, they've been carers. We even have a student who has slept rough on this program. So that's an area where I think we can do even more. We're going to still participate in the foundation degree, and we really want to make sure that those students have a good trajectory and go on to Cambridge. 20 years ago, there wouldn't be a student who didn't get A levels, who has slept rough, who would be studying for a Cambridge degree.
That's true.
So Cambridge is changing, and I'm really pleased about that.
Well, over here, we look forward to the day when Cambridge changes so drastically that they are able to take not just Malaysian students, they do take quite a number, and I'm very happy, Professor Mien is here with us, that they take quite a number of our A-level students every year without fail. But I always felt that they could be a lot more inclusive if they could provide, after all, the Malaysian ringgit is very small, and Cambridge fees are extremely expensive, but they could be a lot more inclusive, like the American Ivy League universities, where they are able to support in the form of grants and scholarships to allow for students from the rest of the world to attend Cambridge without having to worry about whether they have enough money or not.
I mean, this is a big area of focus for Cambridge. So Simon Kukel, who's in the front row here, is actually in this part of the world trying to raise funds for that very purpose. So this is, we are a college that we don't have a lot of money, but we spend a sizable amount of our money on scholarships, bursaries, and hardship grants. Of course, we could always do more, but we are doing quite a lot. And one thing that we are doing here, and that Simon is leading on, is trying to get more money in so that we can help more people. Because if you give someone the gift of education, it is the most precious gift.
Absolutely.
Because I always say that you can leave your child $1 billion, and it can all be gone quite quickly, but nobody will take away their degree from them. And with that degree, they can always try and earn $1 billion on their own. So education is quite important, but we are trying.
Thank you very much for that. So this is a shout out to all the millionaires that we have in the audience. Do see Simon Kroppel later on with your huge check, so that more Malaysians and other deserving students can go to Cambridge without having to worry about not making the finances, because it truly is a problem. Now, some final advice. For many in our audience, we have some students. We just met the president of our student council. We have young professionals. We have academics. I see my dean of medicine and my dean of the business school also here. Trying something new or taking on leadership roles can be daunting, as we all know. But based on your own journey, what would you say to someone who feels unsure about their own potential? Even to me, sometimes I feel like, I've got the imposter syndrome in me, that kind of thing. who sometimes we just feel that we don't fit the mold?
Yeah, that's a good one. I get asked this quite a lot. So the first thing I say if I'm asked to give advice is that it's very difficult to give advice. I mean, I've been given advice to my children for 3 decades. It doesn't work. They just ignore you and do exactly the opposite of what you suggest. So it's always difficult to give advice. But sometimes I think, well, what would I like to have heard when I was coming up or when I was thinking of taking a new role? I think I would have liked someone to tell me, just go ahead and give it a try. If not you, who? And really to believe in your own abilities and not to second guess or compare yourself with someone else. When I was a young lecturer, or youngish, I mean, I started quite late, but when I was a lecturer, I used to spend a lot of time worrying about my contemporaries, wondering if I'd published more papers than them, or I'd got more grants than them. And this is a waste of time, a complete waste of time. So I wish someone had told me to stop worrying about your contemporaries and really focus on yourself, focus on trying to make yourself excellent. That would have been good advice I wish I had got.
Thank you very much. Ladies and gentlemen, this is Professor Dame Ijeoma Uchegbu. Thank you. And you know, in recognition of her service to pharmaceutical sciences and diversity, she was appointed Dame Commander of the Order of the British Empire, also DBE, in just this past New Year honors 2025. So isn't that amazing? So I should say from Nigeria to pharmaceutical science to Cambridge and now to Dame. So amazing. Thank you so much. Would you be kind enough to take some questions, because I'm sure the rest of them would love to interject you.
Okay, ladies and gentlemen, yeah. This is your opportunity to pose a question if you have any burning questions. We have some microphones, well actually just one. The normal thing is when you raise your hand to ask the question, the microphone doesn't work. So let's hope it works. So if you have a question, please raise your hand, state where you're from, and pose your question. We have a question here from Arthur.
Hello, hi. I'm Gautam Narayan. I work with the UN Sustainable Development Solutions Network, Asia headquarters, which is based here in Sunway. First of all, I would like to applaud all the work that you have done up until now and all the work you're involved in as well. And what's something that really caught my attention was also the protest or the push that you did to remove the name of the eugenesis from UCL campus buildings. And it talks to me a lot because my alma mater, University of Geneva, just went through something quite similar recently because they had to remove the names of Carl Vogt and Dufour, who were sort of naturalist scientists and who believed in racist, sexist elements as well. So their names were removed from our university buildings. Just out of curiosity as well, why was it that the process involved that these names were removed but were replaced by numbers for the buildings instead of maybe potentially other scientists who were more so involved in pushing the boundaries as well? So why was that process adopted?
I think, first of all, even though the committee, the commission, really at the end of a 15-month inquiry, taking evidence from over 100 people, we had come to the view that we have to remove the names. The kind of dialogue we didn't want to get into was, well, this other person that you've put there, look at something from their history, which is also problematic. So we didn't want to get into that conversation at all because some people outside the commission actually were not happy that the names were removed. They felt that it was heavy-handed, quite a blunt instrument, and they couldn't see what we had seen because they didn't see all the evidence. So by putting numbers, these are neutral. You cannot argue with the number 23. It has no history, no baggage, and is unlikely to do any harm as well if the person's living. We even set up now a naming group, and the naming group really considers quite carefully who gets their names on the buildings and on different plaques. And normally we go for dead people, because dead people can do no more harm. They cannot change what they cannot, sort of change their personality. And so that really works. But we do a thorough investigation into all aspects of their history as well.
Thank you.
You know, this whole episode brings me to something that happened at the other side, the other university, the dark side. So they
Really
were,
dark.
Yeah. They were trying to remove the statue of Rhodes. And the students were really trying very hard to do that, but they did not succeed. He's still up there. I did see that he was still up there. And it was a bit too high to drag it down, kind of thing. How do you feel about that?
So it's difficult for me to comment on what's going on in a different university, but I think one of the very important things that was illuminated by the inquiry, there was a prevailing wisdom that was how people thought in that day. That was the prevailing, that's how everybody, most people of influence held those views, those pseudo-scientific views. So we attacked that from two different angles. First of all, it's pseudoscience. There is no correlation between how far apart my eyes are or how flat my nose is and my thoughts. So that's the pseudoscience. We know that genomics doesn't work like that. The second thing that we actually came to was these people were challenged in their day. So actually there were some people who challenged them in their day. One very important thing to bear in mind is that when we had a thought of children coming from Germany during the Second World War, so that there was, war was in the air, and there was a big move to evacuate Jewish children. And some of these eugenicists were against that, against the evacuation of children. And they were challenged in their day quite vigorously. So the fact that they were challenged in their day, there is no scientific basis for eugenics, that helped make our argument.
Right.
It's very important. Those were important, especially them being challenged in their day. It was very important.
Did you suffer any kind of, in that time, I wouldn't say cyber attacks, but similar attacks from people who were pro-eugenics?
Well, we didn't have people that came in and said they were pro-eugenics. That would have been really tough for us. But we did have people that came in and said, these men, these eugenicists, had contributed an amazing piece of science.
Amazing.
So, separate from eugenics, they had other areas where they clearly had excelled. And so our response to that was, their archives will still exist. So if you want to study them, you can go to the library. But because of the eugenics angle, and the fact that you could draw a dotted line, not even a dotted line, because Hitler actually admired the American eugenicists, and we know how that turned out.
Yeah.
And because of that, we shouldn't celebrate them. That was our, we're not going to destroy their works will remain, you can quote them if you want to, you can read their papers and their books, but we're not going to celebrate them. Yeah.
Okay, we have a question from Professor Z.
Dr. Sim.
A very good evening, Dame. I've heard about your story from the radio, BBC podcast at 6 o'clock in the morning driving to work. And it's truly my delight to be able to be here and to listen to you again live in person. Thank you for the Thriving in Adversary story. And I would like to learn from you. How do you manage your 24 hours? Being someone in this position, having different priorities and your family, I would like to take a peek into your life.
Yeah, so I manage my diary generally with a lot of difficulty because I have quite a few roles. I'm a governor of the Wellcome Trust, I have the company, I've got Wolfson work, I still have a small group at UCL, so I manage my diary with great difficulty. I'm very happy that I love my daughters, but I'm happy they've left home. I dread the feeling of them deciding they want to come back, but luckily they're all living in their own homes with their own lives, which of course does free up some time. When I was a mom and they were young, then it was quite difficult to travel a lot, to do a lot of things, even to go to conferences. I wouldn't travel to a conference unless I was actually speaking at it. I wouldn't just go for a look-see, because my time was very precious. So with difficulty at the moment, but it has been worse. So actually I'm pretty free now. If the grandchildren come around, it's very good, I enjoy them. But I'm also looking at the clock when they're going to leave. Yeah, so it's very different from how it was, yeah.
Did you know that Dame Ijeoma only flew in just now? Her flight arrived at, was it 12:05?
12:02. Not to be pedantic.
Yes. Yes, Paul was personally at the airport to welcome Dame Ijeoma together with Simon, and she came straight away to Sunway Resort Hotel, where she was just going to freshen up and spend a few hours. We said, this is crazy. Please spend the night. She said, no. We've got to leave very early in the morning at 5 a.m. So we said, but you still need to rest. And we have insisted on it, and I'm sure you agree. But that's how busy her time is. She had a very quick lunch, and then I don't know what she did in a half an hour, probably unpacked a little, and then she ran here. And she's now, interacting with you, and after this, she's going to rush off. She's got an important dinner to go to, and I hope that from that dinner, Simon, you will secure a lot of scholarships for Wolfson. And then at some point she will return back and hopefully catch, a few winks and off she goes to Singapore.
But let me tell you the real story about the hotel room. The real story about the hotel room is that this hotel was generously given to us for a few hours. I walked in and I thought, I'm not leaving. I'm staying the night. It was amazing. I have never been into a room like that, where you walk in, the curtains open. I haven't said anything, I haven't done anything. So, I was wowed. And Simon was a bit hesitant, but I'm not proud. I decided I really wanted to stay in the room, and I thank you so much.
Thank you. We will certainly pass your appreciation on to our chairman, Sir Jeffrey Chia, who, it is his hotel after all.
It's amazing.
He used his name, he said, this is Tan Sri's guests. And he wouldn't have had it any other way.
It is amazing. If you ever get the chance, just go in and have a look and see the curtains open.
Still, go in and staycation.
Okay, we have two questions. First, can I invite a question from Professor Jarlath and our academic scholars?
Professor Jarlath is our founding Vice Chancellor of Sunway University. Professor Jarlath.
Nice to meet you.
Hello. I'm very proud, spent a very enjoyable period in Wolfson as a visiting fellow a long time ago. But I still get your newsletters and so on, yes. I just want to come back again to the naming. I'm a graduate of Trinity College Dublin and also Cambridge, I'm very happy to say, but not Wolfson, St. John's. And I went back to Dublin last year, and I came into Front Square, and I saw a big black shroud put over the name Berkeley. There was the Berkeley Library. And George Berkeley, I mean, we've talked about eugenics, and I fully agree with you about eugenics. George Berkeley was one of the greatest thinkers in the 17th century, philosophical thinkers. And he was a graduate of one of the earliest graduates of Trinity College Dublin, and then he went on to become a fellow of the college. He then later went to America. But during his time in college, of course, he developed his metaphysical thoughts. And he influenced philosophy for quite a long while and is still revered as a great philosopher. So he's not a eugenicist, he was just a philosopher. But when he then went to America on a bit of a mission, and when he was in America, he bought 4 slaves for his plantation. And as a result of that, he's been taken off everything in Trinity College Dublin, including a chair that's named after him, including a library, a great library, because it's a copyright library, one of the 7 in the UK. And I just want to ask you, perhaps there's a bit of fanaticism that goes on sometimes in the removal of names. I fully agree with Elizabeth when she speaks about roads. I don't think it's a very ugly statue anyway, and it should be removed, but I just wonder sometimes if there's a bit of fanaticism with regard to remove the names. Thank you.
Thanks very much. So I don't know much about the person that you described, but I do know that with the names that I'm talking about, they also had a certain persona, a certain history, certain level of contribution. But when you actually looked into the writings of one of the individuals, in fact we looked into the writings of quite a few, we had quite a long inquiry, a lot of reading, and a lot of also evidence from people, what you found was really intolerable. And the reason it was intolerable was this was a place of learning where you're trying to get young minds to stretch, to believe in themselves, and to believe that they can do anything in the world because they are the future. Now, if these young minds, as I said, are having to sit their exam in a room where the person's name at the top of the room actually has considered them to be inferior due to a pseudo-scientific basis, what you do is that you curtail those young minds. And that was the approach that we took. We didn't want any of our minds to be curtailed, we want them to be stretched, and we want them to think they could do whatever they could. And so, by the time we started this work, there were 2 separate camps, because I had appointed some people, management had appointed some other people. So we were in 2 separate camps. By the time they looked at all the evidence, we came to one conclusion. I think that's very powerful, because we had skeptics on one side and believers on the other, but we came to one conclusion. I think that's actually something that shouldn't be trifled at. So we did all the work. We didn't just get up and say we want to remove the names. That was my approach. But we then took a more considered approach, looking at the evidence.
So was management disappointed that the people they hired actually went the other way?
No, in the end they weren't, because what they wanted was a healthy debate.
Great.
They wanted a healthy debate for the pros and the cons. And we had that healthy debate. We had that healthy debate to death. And then we all arrived at the same conclusion. So this is the wisdom of the crowd. It was a select crowd, but we took evidence from over 100 people. So in the end, I believe we got to the right result in the case of the eugenicists. And I will maintain, and if you just give me a few minutes to just talk about this, The most important thing was that we shouldn't celebrate a pseudoscience. It was a pseudoscience, it has nothing to do with genomics. There is nothing in genomics that says that if your eyes are too far apart, you're likely to have different thoughts, different views, a different type of intellect. This was the kind, they were measuring skulls, measuring lengths of arms. So that's pseudoscience. So for that reason, they shouldn't be celebrated. Then you think about the damage they did. The damage of eugenics, where you had an admirer of eugenics and the mid-20th century disaster that led to. And then you think about the fact that they were also challenged in their day. So the evidence was quite overwhelming.
Thank you. So we'll take the last question.
Thank you. My name is Adam Sadeiza. Thank you so much, Dame, for the inspiring session so far. My question is about DEI, diversity, equity, and inclusion. And recently, the concept has come under serious attack. Some people call it as being elitist, being wokeism, all sort of names. And sometimes when you hear all those negative connotations, those of us that truly believe that the world does not deserve to have the opposite of diversity and equity and inclusion, you become worried. And that's why it's an honor to have you here, and I really want to get your thought. Is there something about the practice of DEI or the communication of faith or the philosophy itself that needs to be improved so that we can get the right message out there, so that we can actually get the word to achieve the benefits that is associated with it? Thank you.
Thanks very much. This is obviously a very topical question. So I'm going to quote someone else and use his words. Pete Buttigieg, did I get that right? Pete Buttigieg? So he recently talked about this. So we think about diversity, we think about equity, and we think about inclusion. And then he said, well, think about the opposite. The opposite of diversity is uniformity. I do not see that in this audience. The opposite of equity is inequity, which I don't think anybody wants to witness. And the opposite of inclusion is exclusion. So if we really want uniformity, inequity, and exclusion, then we should definitely say that diversity, equity, and inclusion are things that we don't want. And I don't think anyone, can you put up your hands if you want uniformity, inequity, and exclusion? Just checking. Nobody so far. So this was what he said, and it's quite a powerful message. The other thing to bear in mind is that there isn't a level playing field for certain people. There is the history of disenfranchisement for certain groups. For groups that are maybe ethnic minorities, there is the hangover of not having civil rights in the US, being excluded from certain areas. There are still racial disparities in the West. And if you're LGBTQ, you're also excluded from various areas, despite the fact that we think that we're quite, I would say, forward-thinking. If you're disabled, there are still areas which don't welcome disabled. And if you're poor, well, there are certain areas that you cannot go. Now, most of us don't want to see people excluded. We don't want to see people on the outside. And we understand that it isn't a level playing field. So when we talk about diversity, equity, inclusion, it is a way of leveling the playing field so that people achieve their true potential. So that's the social justice argument. But there is another argument, and there is a lot of data that shows that if you have a diverse set of people making decisions, you actually have better decisions. McKinsey has done this study over and over and over again. And they've been attacked recently. And what they show is that if you have more women in line management roles in the top companies, they're more profitable. If you have more ethnic minorities on the board making decisions, those companies are in the top quartile for profitability. Even as academics, if you have a variety of authors on a paper, you get more cites. We say we don't care about cites, but we all care about our papers being cited. And there are lots and lots of examples. So actually, it is good for business to have diversity. It is good for everything that we do to have a diverse set of views. Now let's think about the third bit. How do we communicate that? That is a problem. It is a problem because we all live in our various communication bubbles. So for example, in the UK, when we were having the vote to leave the European Union, I was certain that the vote would go to stay in the European Union because all my news told me that we were going to stay.
Right.
I was in my bubble.
Correct.
Nobody could communicate to me and say, well, actually, there are quite a lot of people that want to vote leave. So we have to find a new way to communicate because we've all retreated to our bubbles. I think that's the next frontier, better communication.
Thank you. Thank you so much for your questions and thank you so much for your time.